Can I begin by acknowledging that we're meeting today on the traditional lands of the Kaurna people, and we acknowledge their ongoing spiritual relationship with this precious land. I'd also like to acknowledge the Lord Mayor of Adelaide, Sandy Verschoor, Claire Bowen, the Mayor of the City of Port Adelaide, Enfield, my parliamentary colleague, Stephen Patterson, the member for Morphett, my favourite Australian, Dr. Megan Clark, the head of the National Space Agency, April Parmalee, all of you distinguished guests here today, ladies and gentlemen. Today I want to talk about the South Australian economy and how it is transforming, what the government is doing to assist with that transformation, and importantly, the positive response that we are already getting. From the people that will make it happen, investors here and from elsewhere, businesses, existing and new, startups, entrepreneurs, venture capitalists and angel investors, from all of these people, there is now a new mindset emerging here in South Australia. It will lead transformation the likes of which our state hasn't seen, I think, for more than a century. Since our economy began to diversify from primary production into secondary industry. Now, if you think that I'm absolutely energised and excited about our future prospects and opportunities, well, you're 100% right. And I hope that you all are as well. As a scene setter, here's a brief, unbiased overview of the South Australian economy today. No, I'm going to be quoting from non-political sources, leading economists and the Australian Bureau of Statistics, funded by you as the taxpayers of Australia. They state that our state is currently experiencing above-trend growth, with business confidence leading the nation. This is a fact. New business investment in this state is up by 6.3%, and private new capital expenditure is up by a whopping 9%. The market is responding to change, government policy change, to put more emphasis on our state's overall competitiveness and investment attractiveness across the economy, and much less on government handouts to select businesses. The market is also responding to global disruption, like rapid technological change, globalisation, an ageing population, climate change. For optimists, disruption provides opportunities. I'm an optimist. I firmly believe South Australia has the people, businesses, industry sectors that can effectively adapt to and seize this massive opportunity. Just last week, South Australia hosted an international blockchain summit. To bring the summit here, my government partnered with the Australian Davos Connection Forum because I want to encourage local entrepreneurs, startups and blockchain enthusiasts to help develop the potential of this technology for both our own use and to export it to the rest of the world. And to do it right here in South Australia, not having to move elsewhere to pursue the plans and ambitions that these developers have. There were 400 participants in the summit representing 33 countries. Leaders from all over the world of different ages and backgrounds, all confronting change on a daily basis. Ladies and gentlemen, it was only 10 years ago that Bitcoin emerged. Now we can contemplate how this underlying technology of digital assets, distributed ledgers and blockchain can profoundly impact nearly every single sector of our economy. As a result of discussions during the summit, I'm looking forward to participants in the blockchain industry embedding themselves at Lot 14, just along North Terrace from here, on the site of the old Royal Adelaide Hospital. It's a place where entrepreneurs, investors, businesses, global industries, universities and other research institutions are coming together to share ideas and to collaborate, to create and invest in the innovation economy. I want them all to have confidence that South Australia is the right place for them. In my government's first year, we started to create that confidence by doing what we said we would do. Winning the election was of course important, but much more important, however, is how we turn that outcome into opportunity for all those who we have been elected to serve, by matching words with action, by supporting our economy to become more efficient and more competitive. We promised tax cuts. We have now abolished payroll tax for small businesses in South Australia. We've halved the emergencies. Yes, exactly. Get excited. We've also halved the emergency services levy for businesses and households. And next year, land tax cuts come into effect in the middle of the year. In all, a record cut of taxes during our first term. We promised more productive infrastructure. There is $11.3 billion committed to new roads and other infrastructure in our first budget. Again, a record investment in infrastructure. We promised better services. In education, we are making a record investment in our schools as we begin the transition of Year 7 into high school to give our students the best possible start to their participation in the future economy. In skills and training, we're rejuvenating TAFE, and we have a program to create 20,800 new apprenticeships and traineeships over 4 years as a pathway into industry sectors which are set to grow right here in our state. In health, we've reactivated the Repat Hospital, while upgrades are underway with the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, the Modbury Hospital and the Noarlunga Hospital. There is also a very significant investment that we're making in our country health services. Some of the progress that has been made with I think, a much more mature relationship with our federal government. As a result, as I was intimating before when I announced my favourite Australian in the room, we have now secured the headquarters of the Australian Space Agency and a new city deal coming here to Adelaide. And that brings me to the topic of Lot 14, our rapidly developing new CBD neighbourhood, a unique neighbourhood, a place already making a bold statement about what we can be as a state. South Australia is envied around the world for our lifestyle, make no mistake about this, but not yet for innovation and our high-tech culture. What is happening on this prime 7-hectare site, now called Lot 14, is a window into the economic future filled with much more opportunity. Let me explain to you today why. At Lot 14, we'll soon have, in addition to the headquarters of the National Space Agency, startups and entrepreneurs generating new ideas to take to global markets, high-growth businesses exploring new technologies to build on their established successes, investors with a solid pipeline of opportunities to back emerging and growing businesses, and successful entrepreneurs mentoring and guiding future entrepreneurs. Density is vital to the success of an ecosystem like this. Density encourages frequent collisions between startups and entrepreneurs, investors, advisors, mentors, researchers, businesses and corporations. This enables learning to be rapidly shared and highly effectively promoting networks to operate in a seamless physical and digital environment, allowing occupants to work closely and collaboratively. Last week with the Prime Minister and the Lord Mayor of Adelaide, I signed a $550 million Adelaide City deal. It paves the way for the transformation of Lot 14 into an innovation precinct right in the heart of our capital city. The city deal will fund an innovation hub enabling joint research between the public sector, businesses and universities, and the provision of secure environments for government, defence and space entities. Through joint federal-state funding, this city deal adds to the Space Agency, a mission control facility, and the Australian Space Discovery Centre, providing major opening for South Australia to the $345 billion US global space industry. Building cars was South Australia's entree to manufacturing almost 100 years ago. Building the means to explore and work in space can now take us beyond the final frontier. Lot 14 provides the lift-off, pardon all of these puns, the lift-off needed to triple Australia's space economy to $12 billion and create up to 20,000 new jobs in Australia by 2030. So what is it about Lot 14 that is attracting so much interest? What is it about Lot 14 that is the focus of state and federal government money? Why is the energy and creativity being generated around Lot 14 so important to our future? Well, let me focus on what it means for entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship underpins the growth of existing businesses and the establishment of new ones. Young, growing firms can create jobs quickly. South Australia has the highest business survival rate in the nation, but unfortunately for us, one of the lowest rates of business startup. This indicates a level of conservatism in our business culture. We must inspire would-be entrepreneurs to start younger. We need to accelerate the participation of people aged 18 to 24 in early stage entrepreneurship. We're starting in our schools as we seek to provide a pathway to career success. We're giving 4 of our public schools funding to teach students entrepreneurial skills through taking on specialist staff, having dedicated entrepreneurial spaces and piloting business ventures. Apart from anything else, encouraging budding entrepreneurs is important if we want to reverse the flow of young South Australians interstate and overseas. Last year, I appointed the state's very first chief entrepreneur, Jim Wally, who is here with us today. I asked Jim to help raise the profile of our state as the place to be if you wanted to start and to grow a business. Jim is an outstanding businessman. He is co-founder and chairman of innovative defence industry company Nova Systems, as well as being a former fighter pilot. Under Jim's leadership, Lot 14 is becoming a neighbourhood that will create high-value jobs and industry. The neighbourhood is also enabled as a gig city precinct with very high-speed internet connectivity. The market response? Well, let me tell you, it's been overwhelming, extraordinarily strong to date. More than 70% of available commercial space is now committed or under final negotiation. More than 175 people are already collaborating back on that site. An estimated 1,000 people will be working on that site later this year. What is unfolding at Lot 14 meshes with the government's population growth agenda to retain more South Australians in their home state and to attract more business and skilled migration here. One important source of new entrepreneurial talent is business migration. Attracting more migrants with entrepreneurial talent can provide access to vital skills over the shorter term and a source of globally oriented startups with high growth potential. Last week, I signed with the federal government the Adelaide Technology and Innovation Advancement Agreement. This is a 5-year designated area migration agreement, ADAMA. It covers 60 occupations and will allow up to 300 people per year to be sponsored to come to Adelaide. This is in addition to the Supporting Innovation in South Australia visa program being piloted in our state, only in our state, which connects overseas entrepreneurs with investment opportunities in our economy. The federal government has also recognised the need to attract more migrants to regional South Australia with a second DAMA to allow up to 750 people per year to be sponsored. The 2 migration agreements that we've negotiated with Canberra allow businesses to access the skills that they need to meet specific workforce requirements. I really welcome the federal government's backing for our population growth agenda here in South Australia. Our aim is to have our population growth at least at the national level after more than a century of lagging well behind the rest of mainland Australia. People of my age and younger haven't experienced a time yet when our state has been the leader it once was in population and economic growth. Then, strong population growth was a foundation of economic success. I'm absolutely convinced that it can be again. So in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, I want to say we have really thought it a privilege to serve as the new government in South Australia in our first 12 months. Most importantly, I want to say to each and every one of you today a massive thank you. We have seen an uptick. We've seen some wonderful green shoots to our economy here in South Australia. We don't take the credit for this. We say thank you to the people of the private sector. Governments don't actually create jobs. Well, sometimes they can employ many more public servants, but that hasn't been our orientation. Our orientation has been to improve the attractiveness of the business environment here in South Australia. And the business sector has responded. We're very grateful for that. We've made a good start. We're really looking forward to the next 12 months. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Right. First 12 months in office.
Yes.
How's it been?
Well, it's much better than opposition. No, we've really loved it. It's an honour. I know a lot of politicians, rattle off these statements, but it is a real honour to serve as a government. We haven't been there for a long period of time. We worked very hard in the 16 years that we were in opposition, in particular in the years leading up to the election last year, to develop those plans, and we've now been able to roll them out, and I think we've done it in a logical, considered way.
So what did you think would be the hardest thing as you took over the mantle of Premier, and within the cone of silence and with all your mates, what has it been?
Look, I don't know what I thought it was going to be. I mean, we really honestly, Lee, did put a lot of effort. We had a 100-day plan. We had 330 policies that we took to the election. I suppose just coping with the complexity of a transition to government, a new leadership team, a cabinet, all of whom bar one, Rob Lucas, had never been in cabinet before, was a real challenge for us. What was the biggest challenge? Look, I can honestly say we've been really delighted with the way that it's gone to date. I suppose the biggest challenge for us going forward is the projected reduction in the GST distribution to South Australia.
Yep.
So for next year, it's a $345 million downgrade. So what we'd seen over the last sort of 10, 15 plus years was an upgrade. Every time the GST was forecast, we would be forecast a big uplift in South Australia, which sort of covered a lot of inefficiencies. It's now, for the first time, the opposite. And to have a $345 million downgrade is pretty tough for South Australia, but we'll work through that issue and we'll respond in our budget that comes down in June.
The polls recently, and polls never matter unless they're good for you, but the polls are saying that 12 months on you're still 52-48 preferred, which is pretty much what it was at the election. Is that because you're doing good things or you're just not annoying people?
I don't think we've annoyed anybody just yet. Well, actually, there's probably quite a long list of people we have. But look, the polls this far out, especially a statewide two-party preferred vote, I mean, you're talking about so few people per seat, it doesn't make much of a difference. I mean, it's obviously good to still be up in the polls, but my gut feeling is that people are over politics in Australia at the moment. I think they're sick to death of it. I don't think they really want to hear from me on a daily basis. I think they want me to just go off, get this state organised, get the economy growing. They're going to come back and have a look at us in 3 years' time. If we've delivered what we said we were going to deliver, I think they'll give us another 4 years. If not, they'll put the other lot back in. I think it's as simple as that. And I think sometimes politicians try to manage the message far too much. And I think we've got a sophisticated electorate. They don't want to be managed. They don't want central narratives. They don't want central uplifting narratives. They just want their government, especially at the state level, to deliver for them.
Yeah, and a bit of honesty.
I
have to ask you, and it's completely off script, what about One Nation? What have you thought over the last 48 hours?
Do you know, I know this sounds crazy, but I don't actually take too much of a look at what's going on federally. Otherwise, I'd never get any work done.
I can fill you in.
Is it a bit cray-cray at the moment?
Oh, seriously?
Oh.
Yeah, no. So we have Pauline Hanson. So we have an Al Jazeera investigation led by Peter Charlie, who's a very eminent journalist, who has done a very elaborate sting. Note to self, don't do stings, not good. But which has actually had two of her chief lieutenants supposedly in America of their own volition, at their own payment, talking to somebody who purported to have a connection to the NRA about the ability to potentially water down Australian gun laws. There is some conjecture about whether or not they were seeking funds. Anyway, they're in a world of pain. She's standing by them. What do you think that says about that question we just had about the credibility of politicians? You've got to go home and watch it. It's fabulous.
Yeah. It does sound good. It sounds better than fiction, doesn't it? I honestly think that, politics is, it always amplifies in the lead up to an election and then it settles down. So I think, unfortunately for all of you guys, you've got six weeks remaining of some pretty heightened activity. You're going to turn on the television and you're going to have Clive Palmer jumping out at you. This is what's going to happen.
Has he rung your phone?
But, sorry?
Have you had a robocall from Clive?
No, I can't believe it.
Oh,
I feel like I'm really left out. Clive, call me.
But I think it does talk about the impact of potentially minor parties, and we saw in the run-up to the state election when we had minor parties that were nipping at the heels, and that looked very problematic at one point as we go into the federal election. Certainly we have one nation. How do you stand on, for many of us, some people I think like a black and white choice, are minor parties a good thing for politics, or are they simply a pain that gets in the way and distracts from the main message?
Well, we went to the election. The last election was really complicated in South Australia, in fact, with SA Best coming in. And if you look at the polls in that 3 weeks out, you know, actually Nick Xenophon was the preferred premier in South Australia. He's about double me, and I was coming third. But I just make this point about polling. You've got to be very careful to extrapolate from a poll, because polls are used nowadays, I think, to send messages to political parties. It's an indication of where somebody might vote, but I think you've got to be very wary about extrapolating, because the reality is they might want to send a message via polling, but on election day they make a decision about who they think would be in the best interests of themselves and their family. And I think that's what happened in the South Australian election. I think that's probably what will happen in the federal election as well. I think there'll be a movement back to the two major parties, and yeah. That's my gut feel.
Given what's been happening, and I know I'm talking federally, but given what's been happening on the federal plane with the Lib-Nat coalition, is it frustrating, as one could argue, a successful Liberal leader, state leader, to see how they seem determined to implode? Do you ever ring them and give them a bit of advice?
In South Australia.
No, but the Lib-Nat coalition federally.
Yeah. You're asking a lot of questions about federal, but I honestly don't know. I had to join the Liberal Party to even run in politics. It's not been my life's work. There's probably 1,000 people in this room who are more qualified to comment on that. But I just make the point about the federal election. People will make commentary at this point in the cycle about dysfunction within parties or coalitions. But when they go to vote, you've got to say to yourself, well, what is in the best interests of myself, my family, my country? That's what happened in our state election. We said we wanted a majority government because a minority government usually produces pretty poor economic outcomes. The people of South Australia backed that. This next federal election, they're giving up a lot by moving away from the coalition. The coalition's had very strong jobs growth, economic growth, secure borders, investment in defence, and they've actually returned the budget to surplus. And I think what Bill Shorten is offering is quite different from a political strategy that Kevin Rudd employed in 2007. In 2007, you might recall, John Howard had pretty much the same conditions that the coalition have at the moment, but people were a little bit over John Howard. Kevin Rudd came along and said, I'm going to do exactly the same as him, but I'm just going to be newer and fresher. And people voted for Kevin Rudd. Bill Shorten hasn't adopted that strategy. He hasn't said we're going to adopt the economic lever settings of the coalition, which has delivered prosperity for our nation. He's not said that. In fact, he said, I'm going to change all of those economic levers. And I think it'll be very interesting to see how that plays out over the next 6 weeks.
Absolutely, you're right. And I'll move away.
No more questions.
No more questions about the federal.
I've exhausted everything I know about federal politics.
Which is probably a good thing. Okay, so closer to home, you've talked about that there is very much a need for growth. I still get very cranky. I spend a lot of time working interstate on the East Coast, and it annoys the proverbials out of me that they always refer to us as a region. And I understand that, but I see us slightly different. I don't see us as a region. But be that as it may, we need growth. But the last figures will show that we've still got the slowest capital growth. So we're sitting at 1.34 million with growth of only 0.8%. We're the slowest growing capital behind Darwin. So I know what the lofty aspirations are, but the reality says they ain't picking us. So what are we going to do to change it?
I said from day one of the most important things that we needed to do was to really confront this issue head on. We're becoming a smaller and smaller part of the federation. In fact, we lose a federal seat at the upcoming general election, which I think, quite frankly, is a disaster. We haven't kept pace with the national population growth. We have started to see some nice green shoots. In fact, the figures that were out last week showed that the net interstate migration, which is the difference between those that are leaving South Australia and those that are coming back in, which has been escalating in recent years, 4, 5, 6, sometimes 7,000 net interstate migration. The most recent figures fell quite dramatically by more than 30%. So you want to sort of see that consolidate, and you want to see fewer and fewer people leaving, and in fact you ultimately want to see the flow going the other way. I'm hugely optimistic that we can do that. And in fact they've done that in Tasmania, Lee. I mean, a lot of people say, well, you know, slow growth states, you know, well actually Tasmania has a net flow to it. South Australia has a massive net flow away from it, and this is one of the key performance indicators for our government. Do
you think, though, the part of the problem, and I know I'm a very simple girl, as we know, that part of it is the marketing, that if you're looking at Australia and they're going, gee, it's whizzy down the east coast, but then there's those regions, I think the federal government, rightly or wrongly, is underselling the potential of major capital cities like Adelaide.
Well, I think we're our own worst enemy. I think sometimes our narrative is a little bit negative about South Australia, but when I bring people in from interstate and overseas, they think this is amazing. We had people that came to South Australia for the Adelaide Festival and for the Fringe, WOMAD, who were here for the first time. They were walking around astonished. I'm coming back next year, I'm bringing more friends. We had these people for the blockchain conference. They all flew in their private jets, which is fabulous. They'd never heard of Adelaide before.
Exactly.
Now they're taking space down at Lot 14. So I think we've got to do a much better job of getting out and selling this great state that we are. And if we've always had a great lifestyle here, and our economy has lagged. If we can fix the economy side, then I think we've got something really very, very special. I mean, this is always one of the 10 top most livable cities in the world. Now we have to have a commensurate economy sitting alongside that. And that's part of why this city deal is important. That's part of why the defence contracts coming to South Australia are so vital for our regeneration. It's part of why Megan Clark is my favourite Australian, because the Space Agency is coming to South Australia. And people sit up and take notice. When I've been overseas, and I went to Los Angeles, San Francisco earlier in the year.
And who paid for the car?
And somebody paid for the car, which is great. No,
Sorry.
I tell you, when I was over there, when you mention that you have a space agency coming to your capital city, they all sit up. They all want to know how they can get involved. The expenditure that the federal government has allocated to the space agency in Australia is not the big win for us here in South Australia. It's the fact that a lot of private sector companies will want to come and co-locate with a new national space agency. The opportunity there is enormous. We've also, everybody has to keep their fingers crossed, we also have an application in for what is called the SmartSat Cooperative Research Centre. In fact, Jim Wally, Nova Systems, is a key partner with the University of South Australia, and now a huge number of private sector companies, global companies as well as South Australian companies. That's in with the federal government. We're told that they're going to make a decision before the election. If we win that, it really does, I think, sort of cement us as one of the global players in this smart satellite technology arena.
Can I play devil's advocate?
Go on.
Oh, thank you. You talk about, am I the only person here? Then he was talking about blockchains, and I'm going, I've got nothing. Like, seriously. It strikes me that some of this is fabulous, and it's all new age and it's tech. I worry about the relativity to ordinary South Australian families, that we've got this whole new age where we're turning into Houston, we've got Lot 14, we've got space agencies, we've got people walking down Rundle Mall in spacesuits. Do you know, I'm not decrying it for a moment, I think it's all wonderful. I just wonder whether it's being lost on people like me who are part of the great unwashed.
Well, can I just say this? The biggest expenditure in our first budget, which people say was a tough budget, but the biggest expenditure was for 20,800 new apprenticeships and traineeships.
Yeah.
So we're trying to say to people, there's great opportunities, technical opportunities here in South Australia. Get on board. And we're sitting down, we've revitalised the Training and Skills Commission in South Australia. Well, in fact, we have a new Training and Skills Commission in South Australia. We put new industry skills boards in place. We're sitting down with industry saying, what jobs do you have now? What jobs will you have in the future? Let's put that framework around that. So I I don't think we're leaving behind some of our traditional sectors
Yep.
which have been so good to us. And importantly, I just want to add that when you look at the great advantages of nanosat technology, it actually helps to inform and improve the productivity of many of our traditional sectors, agriculture and mining and construction and a whole pile of traditional areas that have been so good to us in South Australia. You couple that with the new emerging technologies around nanosat technologies, operating in constellations, providing information, data back to those sectors. You improve the productivity, you make us more competitive on the international global scale, and you create more jobs in those sectors as well.
Absolutely. Nobody is for a minute not suggesting that it's a really tough juggling act, but you still come back to front pages, and it's not all the media's fault, hospital ramping.
Yep.
Problems like that. What is wrong with the RAH? Is it just not fit for purpose? Why did we build the bloody thing? If it doesn't work, how do we fix it? Because they're the issues that will bite you on the proverbial behind.
I think you're 100% right. I think the previous government decided to build a new hospital, and who can complain about a new hospital? You know, I think that was a reasonable decision that they made. The reality was it hasn't performed as well as we would have liked. In fact, when you look at the Australian Health and Medical Institute statistics, we have the four worst performing hospitals in the country. So we're worst, second to worst, third to worst, and fourth to worst. So it's a major problem in South Australia. I wish I could just wave a magic wand and fix it all overnight. Some of it is to do with some of the structures that we have in place. So we have the most centralised, bureaucratised health system in the country. Again, no criticism of the previous government. It's a reasonable position to take, but it hasn't worked. And so now we need to change that and model what's happening in the best practice state. So you can, the great thing about being in a federation, a competitive federal environment like we have, somebody's always the best in terms of healthcare and somebody's the best in terms of education. You can go and identify best practice, benchmark best practice and bring it back to South Australia. That's what we're doing. I think we've already made some very significant improvements, but it will take some time, I think. And quite frankly, the changes that were made under the previous government with Transforming Health were really all about consolidating, taking a sort of a quite a distributed system and moving it back into the three major teaching hospitals in South Australia. Again, reasonable assumption to make. It hasn't worked, so now we've got to actually sort of move it back to where best practice is.
Does it become difficult because, you know, you've now marked a calendar year in the top job, and I think people get very annoyed with people going, oh yes, but the previous government and what they did, and I was pleased to hear you say that their assumptions may have been reasonable but failed. There has to be a point where you draw a line in the sand and go, it's my problem, we're going to have to fix it. And also to give, I think, people an estimation. Is it going to be 12 months? Is it 3 years? How long is it going to take you to fix what is a basket case?
Yeah, well, I mean, I definitely think that governments need to take accountability. And in fact, in sort of defining the values of our new cabinet and the way that we operate as a government, we set 3 key values for our team. The first one is humility, the second one is accountability, and the third one is delivery. And I think we set accountability because people don't want to have politicians just blaming somebody else.
Absolutely.
Sometimes you have to make a statement of fact because people want to say, well, this is your problem. You need to sort of provide some background as to why we are where we are. But I think, you know, going on and on about that just will annoy people, quite frankly. They don't care about whose problem it is. They just want it fixed. In terms of how quickly we can fix the health system, I think that there are already things that are moving in the right direction. The new structures are coming in place as we speak. So we go from 5 highly centralised local health networks in South Australia to 10.
Yep.
We're putting people back in charge. We've looked at the way that we will interact with those LHNs and provide money to them. They will then determine their own budget, hire and fire their own chief executive, get closer to the issues which exist within their LHN. I'm quite convinced that we can do this. A lot of people say to me, do you know, Marshall, the health system is a complete and utter catastrophe. You'll never solve the problems. Well, all right, just stop for a second, think about that. Are there any other health systems in the country? Yeah, there's actually quite a few.
Yeah.
Are they all in chaos? No. Is this an impossible task? Actually, it's not. You know, it's not actually a problem that is insoluble. We're the 5th largest. There are 4 larger health systems in Australia. They're all independently ranked. They do much better than us. So it's not like it can't be done.
They're going to learn how to do it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Interesting with that because, as I said, they're the sorts of issues, the grassroots issues. While, yes, we have to be looking at growth and Lot 14, which is all terrific, and I'm a huge supporter of it, but it is the grassroots issue. The other one, which I thought was an interesting move, was in terms of education and zoning.
Yes.
Made a lot of families very angry about the fact that they'd invested in a certain area based on the fact that they would have access to certain schools. I couldn't see any way you could spin that well.
No. But what do you want?
Well, that's honest.
But what do you want as a government? Do you want a government that spins things well or makes sensible grown-up decisions on behalf of all taxpayers? And that's what we did. The previous government, not wanting to blame them, but just before the election said, we're going to take all of these people that are in these marginal seats and we're going to transfer your zoning arrangements from the zone that had massive excess capacity and we're going to put you into the zone that has no capacity. Now that's overtly political. What we did was independent modelling through the department that said, look, these are the best zone arrangements that you can possibly have. I know that not everybody's going to agree with what we did, especially those that are affected.
Yeah.
But it wasn't ideological. It was based upon where we had the capacity. And why is it that the Labor Party are now out saying we want to have a 2-tier education system in South Australia? We want to have these brilliant schools and we want to have these second-class schools. I mean, my ambition is not to have 2 tiers of education facilities in this state. We want all of our schools to be good. And by constantly sending out messages, we don't want our kids to go to this school, and this school, that is really, I think, sending a pretty dangerous message to the families and the teachers and the communities around those schools that Labor have decided are subpar.
We won't talk about them.
Okay.
Good. So one of the other big issues that was concerning, I think, a lot of South Australians was about energy supply reliability.
Yes.
And energy costs. Very expensive still for a lot of families. What do you say to the South Australian families about our surety? Are we likely to have another terrifying blackout? And are we still beholden to the eastern states? In terms
I
of
hope
supply?
not, and yes. I think the reality... I'll be quite honest with you. When we had the hottest day on record in South Australia, we only just got through. We still have a very fragile grid here in South Australia. There's not much we can do about that overnight. New generation capacity, especially base load generation capacity, is very difficult to turn on very quickly. And stating the obvious, there is still some uncertainty in terms of federal policy in this area. There's still uncertainty because the Coalition and the Labor Party have completely different arrangements in terms of policy. That creates uncertainty. Uncertainty actually stifles investment in new generation capacity. So I think whatever happens at this election, either a re-elected coalition government or a new Labor government, it will provide greater certainty in terms of energy policy, which will, I think, send the right signals to the sector. What do we do? We are where we are. I mean, we disagreed with the previous government on the way that they managed the transition to renewable energy. We never, ever disagreed with them on the benefits of moving towards more renewable energy, but just the transition that they made and removing undermining the viability of the baseload provider in South Australia, thus taking away that support we have for the intermittent renewable energy. Now we've got an abundance of intermittent renewable energy. We've got to shore that up, and that's why, you know, the interconnector with New South Wales, going out with grid scale and home scale storage programs. They're the things that we're doing, you know, immediately. Have we solved all of those problems? No, they will take some time. But by working with the private sector, to be quite honest, on some limited load shedding around that hottest day, we were able to get through, but quite frankly, only just.
Yeah, so it's not a perfect position. And this isn't a federally related question. I do have to ask, the pundits, the polls, not that anybody believes the polls, would tell you that unless he falls over, it'll be a Shorten-led federal government. Is that problematic for us as a Liberal-led state?
No. I mean, I would much prefer a continuing coalition government. I think they've been extraordinarily good to South Australia over the last 6 years, especially in terms of defence expenditure. I mean, what has been committed to South Australia is order of magnitude better than anything that's ever happened in this state. We'll see this rolling out over over the coming, quite frankly, decades. It is amazing. They've been very good to us. But I think you must appreciate there's been a change in positioning of the government. We've sort of moved away from the fake fights with Canberra, which I know some people say are politically very effective. I just think people are over them now, so I don't think people even want to hear about fake fights with Canberra. I thought we saw a lot of that from the previous government, and I think that undermines the psyche of a state. If your leaders are constantly out there saying, we're getting done over by the Libs, or we're getting done over by Canberra, or we're getting done over by the Victorians, then I think it starts to eventually sap at business confidence and the psyche of the state. And we've just stopped all of that. We're just sort of saying, we're just going to get on with that. And I think that business confidence increase, that consumer confidence increase that we've seen has been really good. And I mean, take a look at those state final demand figures that were published for the December quarter last year. We only saw them a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
South Australia grew in the December quarter 4 times faster than the nation. I mean,
Why?
who can ever remember a situation where that's occurred in South Australia?
So my question is why, and how do you keep it going?
Well, I think, as I tried to say today, I don't take the credit for this. I say thank you to the business community, the people from the private sector who are putting their personal wealth on the line to invest in their business, to create jobs. They're the real heroes of our economy, and the people that are maybe not with their private wealth, but they're working in a private sector company, who are thinking, actually, I think things are looking better in South Australia. So instead of sort of ratcheting down investment and ratcheting down personnel, they think, oh, actually, I think we'll put on a few more people, or we'll invest further. It's those small changes, I think, in business confidence and consumer confidence in the psyche of the state, which is really transforming. And you look at that state final demand figure and you sort of think, I know it's only,
It's one quarter.
Well, in fact, the annualised now is, we've got South Australia up to about 2.3.
It's good.
2.2, 2.3%, which is, again, it's a complete outlier when you compare it with the performance that we've had over the last decade.
So we're performing well internally, as it were, and you did appoint Stephen Joyce to review the state government's export strategy.
Yes.
How's that going? How do we look?
Well, Stephen Joyce was one of the key economic ministers in New Zealand
yep.
for a decade under Key and English governments. We asked him to come in and review the Department Trade, Tourism and Investment. These are essentially all the areas that face the external world. It's absolutely critical that we get this right. We made some changes after the election, so we put disparate parts of government all into the one. It still wasn't performing at a level that we wanted to see it performing, so we thought the best way to do this is to get an independent expert in. He's put the recommendations to us. We've accepted the vast majority of those, and now we get on.
I was going to say, what was the key recommendation where he went, no, you're just missing the mark here?
I think it was a bit of a hangover from the previous government. His key point is you should think sectorally. You should think what is the business offer to the potential investor to South Australia, and it shouldn't ever be here's an incentive for you, here's an incentive for you, here's an incentive for you, because you run out of money very quickly, and I'd have to stick up the taxes on all of the rest of you so that I could pick winners and give it to a few. They said this is nonsensical. Actually, you've got a lot of things going for you in South Australia. You've got a skilled workforce, you've got a lower cost of operation, a lower cost of that skilled workforce. You've got a good regulatory environment. You've got a government which is pro-business. Go out and sell that. And so reorienting an entire department to sell, not based on a subsidy, but on a business environment was, I think, probably the key message from that report. And it's a very important message. I think the other thing is it talked about you can't just have one department fully responsible for your success in terms of trade, tourism, investment, international students. Actually, everybody's got to take collective responsibility around the cabinet table for that. Often, a hold-up to investment might be in a completely different department. It might be in DIPTI, it might be environment and water, it might be in the Premier's department, it might be in Treasury. So we need to take collective responsibility.
All right, I'm running out of time. I've got to ask you, you spoke a lot about Lot 14 and there's a real buzz around it. I think people are still struggling to understand what it looks, touches and feels like. How do we solve that?
Okay, I think seeing is believing for South Australians, and I think they're going to see a lot of movement over the next 6 months. So hang on. Lot 14, Colonel Light named it Lot 14, was a functioning hospital till 18 months ago. It's now going to be a mixed-use site. It's going to have a globally significant Aboriginal arts and cultures gallery. We're going to transfer the Regency College of TAFE in hospitality and hotel management into the centre of the city because it's a great school, but to attract more international students, which we want into South Australia, it can't be at Regency Park, it's got to be in the centre of the city. And then this incredible opportunity with an incubator accelerator and this movement with where you've got startups and scale-ups and you've got undergraduates and postgraduates
and where the public are welcome.
And the public can go in.
It's not a sort of a walled only for, boffins, which I think is fabulous, that anybody can go in there.
No walls, and great global companies, of course the Space Agency. And importantly, and I think this is what differentiates our precinct from others that exist, is that it's curated not by government or the university sector, but actually by a chief entrepreneur. And that's a real point of differentiation for what we're offering in South Australia.
Final question, next 12 months, what hand on heart, what do you need to achieve?
We've got to maintain that confidence level in our business community, our consumer community here in South Australia. I want to win that SmartSat CRC. I've actually offered to mow the lawn of the Prime Minister if he'll sign off for sooner rather than later. That is so critical.
In your spacesuit.
I'll do it in whatever he wants. Maybe not whatever he wants actually, but I will do it, and it will be done extraordinarily well. Edges as well. I'll do the whole lot for him. I think we need to really focus on population growth. Yep. The Dharmas are a major movement forward, but now we've got to deliver on those Dharmas. If we get that population growth, if we maintain business confidence and consumer confidence, if we get that smart CRC, we deliver Lot 14, I think we'll be in a very much better place 12 months on from today.
Premier Stephen Marshall, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks,